Welcome. The Angry Moderate Show, April 26th, 2012. This is my extremely sophisticated look, right? This is the look, you start with them up here and then you tip them down, and you get the look where you seemingly know more than you actually do. So this is actually a great ruse on my part, a feint, F-E-I-N-T, feint, as opposed to F-A-I-N-T, feint. It's a fake, it's a little shimmy, because I take the glasses and I put them down like this, and then you think that I'm an intellectual, and I'm not. I'm just a guy looking for attention. That's all I really am here, is a guy babbling about stuff and trying to get your attention. But anyway, Angry Moderate, just babbling on. I hope you'll listen, and if you don't, that's okay too. Let's go right to the pet peeves list for April 26th, 2012. Pet peeves. Pet peeve number 1, coffee baristas who are mopping the floor and then go and pick up my coffee cup that they are going to give to me by the rim. Now, look, I totally don't want to drink a cup of coffee where you have just been mopping the floor and you grab my coffee cup with the same hand that was grabbing the handle of the mop. Yuck. So now what I do is, out of sight, out of mind, right? I order the coffee, I turn around, and I don't look. I pretend it's not happening. La, 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 I'm not looking at the guy who just is mopping the floor and now he's going to get my coffee, right? Because if I don't know, can't hurt me, right? I think it's a great solution. Pet peeve number 2 from the Angry Moderate, Dan Weintraub. That's me. People who cough really loudly on airplanes. I could go on about stuff on airplanes, but the coughing. And then what happens is, someone like me who in public doesn't want to create any kind of ripples in the universe, just pretends to ignore it. Oh, it's no big deal that this person with tuberculosis is coughing on my neck from behind. I'm just going to sit here and pretend that it's all good, and I talk to the flight attendant. Oh, yes, I'd like to have my black coffee, as the coughs and the spittle are building up on the back of my neck. And there's the dude behind me. Right? Hate that. It's gross. But not much you can do about it these days. You get on the airplane, there are lots of people packed into a very small space like sardines, and you fly on. Wherever you are going, there will be people coughing on the airplane. It's better than the rogue puker on the airplane. Do not like the rogue puker. Yes, I have great sympathy and empathy for the rogue puker. Everybody gets on the airplane and they sit down and they say to themselves, hope I don't have to use the air sickness bag. Not necessarily because they are averse to puking, but because it would be so embarrassing. Who was the puker? Yeah, it's the guy in 4C. Sorry, everybody. I'm the puker. Yeah. Bad clams for lunch. I knew that was a mistake before getting on the airplane. Everybody cheers for the puker, right? Everybody gets off the airplane. Everybody's like, hey, there he is. There's the barfer. Good job, dude. At least you're not the cougher with tuberculosis spraying spittle on the back of my neck. Airplanes, traveling, it's become, now someone once said to me recently, hey, you shouldn't complain. I mean, think about it. Isn't it amazing you can get on this metal device and 3 hours later you can be anywhere in the country? He was right. I mean, that's pretty amazing that one can do that. But air travel has become kind of surreal. I take my kids to the airport. We go to visit my parents in Florida in the wintertime. And, all right, kids, take off your shoes because the metal detectors are going to find out if you've got any weapons with you, right? Come on. no, we can't let you bring the Motrin, the liquid Motrin, onto the plane because it might blow up. Right, yeah. I'm definitely bringing on the liquid Motrin that might blow up. I just, And then there's you wait in line for 45 minutes to get through all in the TSA and right? And then you finally and then your flight is delayed, and then they cancel them. It's like this capricious flight cancelage. CFCs. What are the chlorofluorocarbon CFCs? Those are actually capricious flight cancellations, where stuff is just canceled. You're looking up at I was traveling back and forth from Boston and Manchester to Oklahoma City a year or 2 years ago for work. And I'd be sitting in the airport, somewhere, sitting in Atlanta, waiting for my flight to Oklahoma City. So I was waiting, we're going to board in 10 minutes. We're going to board a little late. Canceled. It's like, what? When can I get to, I got to get to work. Well, let's see, we have another flight, erudite look. This is the person at the desk in the flight office trying to look intellectual. Well, let's see, we've got another flight that's leaving Atlanta. That would be tomorrow at 3 in the afternoon. Tomorrow at 3 in the afternoon, that's 30 hours from now. I'm going to miss 2 entire days of work. Well, it's the best we can do. Thank you, it's the best you can do. Why'd you cancel the flight? They say that they cancel flights for mechanical reasons. They cancel flights because they're not full. They don't want to spend the money on the fuel. Capricious flight cancellations. They also cancel flights for pukers. This is great. I was recording some music in California in 2008. Coffee. And I was flying back from Los Angeles to Manchester, and I got stuck in Charlotte, North Carolina for overnight. I was supposed to catch a connecting flight from Charlotte to Manchester. They canceled the flight because someone projectile vomited on the airplane. I was kind of happy for that flight cancellation, right? We don't want to get on there like, with gas masks, and the stuff in the movie. What's the movie? Silence of the Lambs, Hello, Clarice, where they put the stuff underneath your nose so that you only smell like menthol in case you're in a real nasty zone, when they're doing the autopsy, right? So I wanted to get some of that stuff. I have a great business idea, by the way. For any of you entrepreneurs out there who want to steal it, you have perfect license to steal it. Just, mention that you stole it, from me. We need to produce some kind of smell thing, like, something that you can put underneath your nostrils that smells really good, that cancels out bad smell. So, for example, bad breath, big pet peeve for me. Like, I have a really hard time with people who have bad breath, chronic halitosis. It's not that I'm angry with them or that I blame them for having bad breath. I drink a lot of this and I eat a lot of, sandwiches, seafood salad, right, and coffee. That's gonna make the good breath, yeah. But people who have chronically bad breath, I'm like, I can't really, it's a good idea. I have to run away. But why is it that we make the responsibility of having the better breath on the breath person? It shouldn't be their responsibility. We're blaming the victim. We shouldn't make the bad breath person have to fix their breath, brushing their teeth every 20 minutes, mouthwash that has alcohol in it that kills every possible thing that would be good in your mouth. You're right. Little smelly things, little essential oils or whatever, little that you put under your nostrils or even in your nose, little surreptitious little fragrance devices in your nose so that someone can have bad breath and you turn on a little switch. You're like, gotta turn on the lavender smell because if I'm going to be here talking to this person, right? I think that the divorce rate would go down. I think that it would be a much happier planet. People would find great joy if this idea were taken. So if you think that you can market this idea of the chronic halitosis elimination device, not used by the bad breath person, but by the smeller, go ahead and use it. I give you perfect, total permission. I haven't patented any formula or any idea, but I think that there's a stroke of genius here, right? Think about it. Great idea. More pet peeves from the Angry Moderate. People who laugh at their own jokes. Now, you know, it's one thing to laugh when you are cued by others laughing. But it's a whole nother thing to laugh and expect other people to also laugh. I had a friend in Texas, and he would say something, and he would be like, blah, 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 blah. And it was like looking at me like, isn't that funny? And you have to laugh too now, Dan. And I'd be like, well, so what do I do now? He's my friend, and I don't want to sit here and be like, not really that funny. I didn't want to embarrass him. I didn't want to appear to be like kind of curmudgeon-y or mean-spirited by not, yuck, piece of lunch, right? Yeah, yuck. By not laughing, but it wasn't funny. It was a constant unfunniness that I was stuck. And I started to get angry with him because I felt like I was being forced to laugh, like he was holding me laugh hostage, like that I had to laugh in order to reflect his need for that attention, his need for me to laugh. And then I got resentful and downright angry. I was the angry being forced to laugh moderate. Anyway, he's still my friend, and I just try to give little smiles when he tells his silly stories that aren't very funny. Blah, 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 blah. More pet peeves from the Angry Moderate. Let me take a little bit more of my caffeine. This is actually quite delicious. Caffeine from the Tip Top Cafe. Women who on dating sites put pictures of their dogs. Now look, the Angry Moderate is divorced, is single, and goes on Match.com to see if he, speaking of himself in the third person, trying to deny the reality. Anyway, to see if I can find a date. Go out, have a cup of coffee? Yeah. I vet. This is a little play on words here, isn't there? Dogs, vet, right? You with me? I vet women on Match.com based upon any reference to their quadruped pets. I don't get it at all. I mean, fine, dogs are cute, kind of smelly, right? Hence, back to the stuff. Especially golden retrievers who come outside from being wet and everybody's like, oh, there's Fluffy, and they're petting Fluffy, and I'm like, God, Fluffy stinks, man, right? But people who are so enamored of their pets, people who put the pictures of their pets, women who put pictures of their pets on dating sites, I'm like, oh, so this, so am I, like, and then they say things like, must love dogs. What? Like, we can't go out unless I love your dog. So what I really want to do is I want to respond to them and say, I don't even know your dog yet, but I love that dog. What kind of dog is it? Half Pekingese, half Chihuahua? That's my favorite blend, right? It's like the French roast Sumatra blend, the Pekingese Chihuahua. What a wonderful dog. It is a great dog. I may even love your dog more than I could ever love you. Yeah, I don't know what they would say. They'd be like, whoa, that's kind of freakish, dude. Maybe I don't want to go out with you after all. Well, look, you guys, stop putting pictures of your pets on dating sites. It's weird. It's odd. It's troubling. Again, let me give you a hint, okay? Men are totally uninterested in what pets you have. And really, men are not very interested in, like, what sports you like. It's all about chemistry. Men take a look at the picture and they're like, oh, she's attractive. Hi, my name is Stan, right? Then you get together, you have a cup of coffee, If there's chemistry, you're like, oh, well, maybe we should go out again. Yeah, but I like theater and I like sports. Who cares? You'll do your theater thing. I'll do my sports thing. We can still hang out. But people are like, oh, you don't like golf? Well, I love golf. That means we could never be compatible. Yeah, I probably could. Probably even better, right? Honey, going to play golf for 6 hours. You're going to go do your theater thing, Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Women, take the pictures of the dogs off of the dating sites. It's troubling. Angry Moderate, a few more pet peeves before I get to the issues of the day. Pet peeves, a big one coming up. Ready? People who refuse to admit self-interest. This is actually a big one. This is actually one that ties into issues, right? So let's take the Wall Street executive on one hand and the protester who's part of the Occupy movement on the other hand, right? Two extremes, you would say. The Wall Street executive making millions of dollars must be greedy, must be avaricious, which is actually redundant because doesn't avaricious mean greedy? Must be all about self-interest, self-absorbed, mine. And then you look at the Occupy protester doing justice for the people, being so selfless, working hard for righteousness, giving up himself and his own gain for the public good. Baloney. The Occupy protester is motivated as much by self-interest as is the Wall Street executive. The Wall Street executive is just a little bit more honest about it. Yeah, I want to be rich. That's what I want. I want 3 houses and I want to drive a Lexus. Yeah, but you kind of do it in a sort of scummy way by going out there and creating all these, weird financial instruments and derivatives and cheating and lying and stealing. Everybody does it, so might as well get in on the pie myself. Well, that's one form of self-interest. It's a rather straightforward and honest form of self-interest. Yes, there's dishonesty built in. There's dishonesty built into our entire economic system. But on the other hand, why does the Occupy protester participate in a political movement, a liberation movement, or any kind of a justice-oriented movement? Is it because the Occupy protester, or whomever, is altruistic? No, it's self-interest. Well, what do they get out of being part of that movement? They get a sense of community. Maybe they get attention, like the Angry Moderate sitting in front of the TV camera. Do you think I do this to educate you? Do you think I do this because I want to change the world? No, it's self-interest. I like the attention. Basic self-interest. If you learn something along the way, cool, that's even better, right? That's cool. It's like a little added bonus, right? But it's self-interest. The Occupy protester, why does she or he do what they do? It's community. They like the process, part of the attention that they get. They are trying to change the world so that they have more of the pie. Well, there's all of this talk about redistributing the wealth, the 99%, of which I'm one, the 99% we pound our fists and we say, it's not fair. There's a huge disparity between the wealthy and the poor. We want a piece of the pie. Oh, what's that called? Self-interest. Right? We want some of that. Right? We want to have the good health care. It's so funny, like socialized medicine, right? The idea that you could have a health care system that takes care of everyone. Could we have it? Of course we could have it. Would it be too expensive? Of course it wouldn't be too expensive. For crying out loud, the Federal Reserve could create $1 trillion tomorrow. They could just monetize the debt, created bonds that were sold or offered by the Treasury, and $500 billion could be put into a healthcare program that could fund healthcare for everybody in a heartbeat. Why do people like me want socialized medicine? Self-interest. We want to be taken care of, right? If we're having the palpitations, we want to be able to go to the doctor and say, I'm having the palpitations, you know, the kind where my heart beats out a beat like, you know, Babaloo, Ricky Ricardo. We want to be able to go to the dentist and say, I got the cavity up here that's the size of a nickel, right? I can look into my tooth and I can see the nerve going, hello, and I'd like to be able to have that tooth fixed, as opposed to going to Dan & Witt's, buying their best pair of pliers and yanking it out. Self-interest. But we are able to somehow convince ourselves, which is going to bring me to my next pet peeve, by the way, convince ourselves that what we're doing is somehow more righteous than what the Wall Street executive is doing. You can make a moral argument that somehow the Occupy protester is more righteous because they're trying to create a system that is more even, but they're trying to create that equality so that they benefit. Self-interest. There is no altruism. Am I somehow like saying something really bad here? That like the lack of altruism, you know, that it's bad that there's no altruism? No, I think it's just human. It's just human. We are trying to be happy. We are trying to get stuff. We are trying to create a world, a life that makes sense for us. And when we do that, that's self-interest in heart. Look, I worked in public education, for public and private, public schools and independent schools for over 20 years. And people say to me, wow, Dan, that's really great. You were really working hard on behalf of the kids. And I'm able to say, oh, yeah, I'm a good guy, aren't I? I was working hard on behalf of the kids. Yeah, pat myself on the back. Yep. Yeah. Why did I do it? Because it fit my personality. Being a teacher fit. Being a coach fit. Just who I am, it worked for me, right? Self-interest. I enjoyed it. It made my life more pleasant, happier, self-interest. The fact that it was a vocation that didn't pay as much as the Wall Street executive, I can say, oh yeah, teachers aren't paid enough because we're the heroes of the world. Self-interest. And by the way, while I'm on this topic of public education and public teachers, you have no idea which direction I'm going, do you? You're thinking, oh, what's he going to say here? Is he going to rail on public teachers because he's going to call them greedy and self-interested? Or is he going to, where is he going? You ready? And go! Here we go. Public education. There are, every day, articles written, and this is predominantly by people on the right, articles written and words spoken about how public education is failing our children, about how public schools are failing, that public schools are not. Look, I worked in Windsor and the Windsor Public Schools, Windsor, Vermont, for a year. And recently, over the last several years, the Windsor Public Schools have been struggling. There has been documented difficulties in the school and the state, and right? Okay, you can look it up, right? Google Windsor Public Schools failing, test scores, la la la. And many of you out there who tend to be on the political right would say, yeah, that's it, I mean, the teachers, they get paid too much and they have long vacations and they just don't work hard enough and it's really the fault of the schools. Sorry. It's not. It's the fault of the communities and the fault of the families. And I'm going to throw the word fault out. It's because communities and family structures have broken down and the kids fall through the cracks. Is it true that you tend to have school systems where there is a socioeconomic disparity and where you have more poor people that you tend to get school systems where the cracks are bigger and more people fall through. Yeah, it is true. Right? You're going to probably have less kids falling through the cracks at Marion Cross than you are at State Street School in Windsor, and it does have something to do with social class. Absolutely. You know, to deny that is just to be dishonest, right? To hide behind some political correctness and say, so what you're saying, Dan, is that poverty breeds illiteracy. No, what I'm saying is that more kids fall through the cracks in schools that don't have the resources and where communities and families have broken down. I would imagine the data would back that up. So when you decide that you want to blame the public schools for our failing educational system, you're a liar. You're dishonest. You're disingenuous. Because you know how hard the teachers are working. You know what it's like for 25 or 30 kids who come from difficult backgrounds to show up in a classroom, and how you're going to reach all those kids of such varying degrees of their background and what they know and what they can do. You know that that's the truth. And you know that the truth is when families break down and when kids are parked in front of a television instead of out doing stuff, and when communities break down and communities aren't mentoring children, and when people in the communities aren't taking care of the children, you know that the clientele that shows up at that school is unable to learn or has a very difficult time learning. And then you say, well, let's cut the education spending and hire fewer professionals to work in these schools because the schools are failing. Clearly, we're not getting our tax dollars adequately used by the schools, so we should spend less. Sorry. It's dishonest. Right? It's dishonest to say that schools are failing. Communities are failing, and families are failing. And schools are the heroes, and public educators are the heroes. However, it is still, most teachers do go into the profession because of self-interest. I'm not saying that the teachers should be held up on high as some great heroes. Right? They still go into the profession because they like doing it. Makes them feel good. Self-interest. They have fun. They like being around kids. Maybe they like the attention, self-interest. So I'm not saying celebrate the teachers. I'm saying just be honest about public education. Schools aren't failing. Communities and families are failing. It's a big one, folks. And my last pet peeve, before I get into the issues, the political issues. Wow, it's 4:05. Political issues of the day. No, 3:05. Well, it's 3:05 here because we're taping, right? But it won't be 3:05 when you see this. But since we're taping the show, and it's not a live call-in show, I say, hey, look, I'm looking at the clock. It's 3:05. But for you, it'll be a different time when you watch this. Last pet peeve, people who hate Star Trek just because. Don't hate Star Trek just because. You got to watch Kirk and Spock, McCoy. I'm a doctor, not a carpenter, right? Scotty. Does it go well with Scotch? You know? Yeah. Give it a try. Star Trek. Okay. Do you remember that scene from Wayne's World where they're sitting on the car, you know? I love that scene where he's like, I'm a good whistler. I keep a good tune in terms of whistling. Anyway, the Angry Moderate's now going to get to the political issues of the day. Take a little more caffeine. It's good stuff. And ramble on for about another 20, 25 minutes. If you're watching this particular episode of The Angry Moderate, you have once again chosen to waste your good time simply buoying my self-interest of loving being at the center of attention, right? Work in theater, center of attention. Stand up in front of a classroom and lecture about history, center of attention. You know, soccer coach, center of attention. In front of the camera, same thing. Self-interest. The Angry Moderate is an honest man. Honest enough to admit that he does this for attention. Anyway, political issues of the day. I read today that satellite data reveals that the Antarctic shelf, that ice shelf, is melting from below. So the ice is melting, but it's not melting on the surface, it's melting from below. And I know that it is ideologically impossible for people on the right to admit that the data supports that there is climate change, that there is global warming, that temperatures are rising, that the environment is being warmed by the release of billions of tons of pollutants and carbon. Which one is it? Is it dioxide or monoxide or both? I mean, I know that cars spew out carbon monoxide when, it comes up, but it's carbon dioxide, CO2, that's warming the planet, right? Yeah, I'm not much of a scientist. But there does seem to be a heck of a lot of verifiable data backed up by hundreds of thousands of hours of rigorous scholarship that says, yeah, we are experiencing climate change and that the planet is, generally speaking, becoming more unstable meteorologically, etc., because of global warming. Now, there are many people on the right who say that there are people on the left who are manipulating this information to get rich. Totally agree. Totally agree. Right? Al Gore, I'm sure, has pocketed millions based upon his The Inconvenient Truth video series, the movie, right? I'm sure the guy has made tens of millions on speaking engagements, getting up in front of, doing his theatrical, little show about global warming and about climate change, right? No doubt. Self-interest, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that the data is false. That doesn't mean that it's a lie. Just because there are people on the left who are exploiting this particular issue for economic gain doesn't mean that it's not true. Right? This is a critical piece that you have to at least have the courage, if you're on the political right, to acknowledge. But you don't have that courage. You don't have that courage. Because you know why? Because you're dishonest. And I'm not saying that people on the political right are dishonest and people on the left are somehow honest. I'm not. Because people on the left who join things like the Occupy movement and say that they're doing it because they want to change the world for the better will not admit that they have at a very basic level, there's self-interest involved. That they enjoy the attention, that they enjoy the community, that they enjoy that it gives them a sense of power when in our society they feel disempowered. They won't admit that. They're like, no, I'm here to change the world for the better. No, you're here because it feels good to be here. Right? Both sides on an ideological divide and complete dishonesty from both. So I read about the Antarctic ice shelf melting from below, and I say to myself, well, I'm not much of a scientist, but probably that means that the water is getting warmer, and if the water is getting warmer, it probably means that the ice is melting, and if the sun is, beating a little more strongly, it probably means that the ice is melting because the water is getting warmer. I'm just speculating here. This is like my basic scientific knowledge. But if you talk to people on the political right, they will figure out any possible way to deny that there's climate change because they just can't deal with the fact that there's hypocrisy on the left surrounding the issue of climate change. Right? That there's hypocrisy on the left with, for example, giving hundreds of millions of dollars in subsidy to people who are researching solar projects, and the people who are researching these solar projects are doing stuff with solar energy, pocket the profits. And the people on the right say, look, it's a total scam. People on the left are just getting rich from it. And I say, yeah, you're probably right. There are probably a lot of people who are political liberals and leftists who are getting rich on global warming, but it doesn't mean that the data is untrue. It doesn't mean that global warming is a scam. It means that the left is scamming on global warming. Can you see the difference? It doesn't mean that climate change is a lie. It means that people are lying about climate change in order to make a profit. They're not lying and saying it exists when it doesn't exist. They're just tweaking it as a way to get rich. Self-interest. Look, there are liberals who drive Lexuses. What? What is that about? If you're a real political liberal, what are you doing with millions of dollars? What are you doing on the one hand saying, I believe in equality and I believe in social democracy, and spending $55,000 or $60,000 on a car? Are you kidding me? Is that hypocritical? Absolutely. Are most people hypocritical like that? Absolutely. Why? Self-interest. Because they won't admit it. Give me a liberal who says, yeah, believe in a lot of good things in terms of making sure that the have-nots have more stuff, but I still am going to buy my Lexus, and I'm still going to spend $100 on a bottle of wine, and I'm still going to go on a month-long vacation to some villa in Italy, and I admit that it's hypocritical, and I admit that I have a lot of self-interest, and that's the best I can do. Okay. I can buy that. Right? At least there's a little bit of honesty there. But when it comes to this issue of climate change, you talk to people on the right, and they will deny that climate change exists to their death. It's extraordinary. They will put their hands over their eyes and over their ears, and they'll say, nope, it's not. It's all been made up. Pretty extraordinary. I was listening to a story on National Public Radio the other day about British Petroleum and how British Petroleum has become a profitable. They're the guys, right, who ran the oil rig that blew up in the Gulf of Mexico and that spewed, how many hundreds of millions of gallons of oil into the Gulf, right? So then the whole story is like, oh yeah, well there are these microbes that are eating all of the oil. So really the pollution is not that bad. And they have these TV commercials, right? Kind of these really cool, makes you feel good with the good music, like, we're here for the long haul, everybody's happy, they're working hard. And you're sitting there watching, you're like, wow, BP, they're not so bad. First of all, that's because we're just as a species, we're not great at using our front brain, our prefrontal cortex, I think it's called, our ability to reason. We hear some great music and something, we react, and we all of a sudden are like, yeah, wow, BP. Instead of saying, yeah, wow, BP, great TV commercial. That was a great commercial. Total Lies, great commercial. Wow, brilliant. Love that commercial. Totally untrue. Brilliant. The story on NPR was interesting because they were talking about now how the microbes are mutating, right? So these mutagenic, because oil's a mutagen, right? Petrol, has mutagenic properties. So like radioactive things have mutagenic properties, right? They cause cells to go in funky ways. And so now these microbes are mutating, right? The microbes that are mutating, that are supposedly eating the oil. And BP is saying that, right, the pollution's under control. And then you've got other people walking on the beaches saying, see that over there? That's a little bit of oil. And oh yeah, this pelican refuge, this place where pelicans used to do their thing. There are no more pelicans here, and la la la. And what's amazing to me is that BP is now is profitable. They've turned a big profit, $45 billion or something in the last quarter. I can't remember. And you ask yourself, well, why is BP profitable? And there are many reasons why oil companies are profitable. They collude to push up the price of oil. I mean, oil and gas, those things are no longer tied to each other, right? This is you see the cost of a barrel of oil, right? The cost of a barrel of oil has wavered somewhere in the last couple of years between $60 or $70 a barrel and $110, $120 a barrel. And when the cost of a barrel of oil goes down from $100 to $95, you would think that, okay, well, your gas would kind of go down too. Well, it doesn't, right? We're paying $4 a gallon for gasoline, and oil's what, about $100 a barrel right now? But weren't we paying $3 a gallon for gasoline a year and a half ago, and oil was about $90, $95 a barrel, something like that? The cost of gas and the cost of oil are no longer tied to each other. Right? You're going to go to the gas station, and if a gallon of gas is $4.30, you're going to pay the $4.30 because that's who we are. We've got to get places, right? And BP has become profitable again because they're able to sell their product still on a marketplace that is absolutely desperate for their product. We are a world that has grown by leaps and bounds, technologically, population, everything, because of petroleum, We are an oil society. Without oil, We would be thrust back into, a pre-industrial time. That would be rather entertaining, wouldn't it? No. BP is also profitable because they cut a bunch of people from their payroll. I mean, look, if you're a company that's trading on the stock market and you're all of a sudden able to say, yeah, we are much more, we turned a good profit last quarter. Well, why is that? Well, we fired 5,000 people. Great move on our part. We're just going to downsize a little and we're going to give all the money to our CEOs. There's self-interest for you. There are, I'm sure, liberals who work for BP, who make their millions of dollars and drive their Lexuses. There are liberals who work on Wall Street and make their tens of millions and give $10,000 to Barack Obama's election campaign and say to themselves, I'm doing good work on behalf of the liberal cause. Yeah, but you're a mega millionaire. You could take your money and single-handedly fund an entire city school system for 2 years. Yeah, well, schools are failing our kids. Why would I want to put my money into that failing enterprise? And then we go back, right? Here we go. So hypocrisy on the left, hypocrisy on the right, no question about it. Self-interest at the heart of that issue. Let's talk for a second about drone attacks. For those of you out there, I am the angry moderate. I am a centrist. I am a political centrist. It happens that when I look at the world, I tend to look at it in terms of, boy, why do we let so many people suffer? Which tends to be more of a liberal perspective. But the hypocrisy, both sides of the political aisle are equally unwilling to admit self-interest and equally willing to tweak and game the system for their own growth and their own edification. And as long as it can be spun in a way that makes things seem different than they really are, and that people aren't using their front brains and trying to discern fact from fiction and truth, from illusion, then any side of the political spectrum can benefit. So you've got President Obama, who is able to create the aura of being for the people and for the good of the world, and someone who is invested in ideas of democratic ideals, and yet under his aegis, under the aegis of the last 4 years of a liberal administration, we have more surveillance of Americans than we've ever had in the past, covert surveillance, electronic surveillance. We now have more drone attacks, unmanned airplanes, flying over sovereign countries, Yemen, Pakistan, dropping bombs on supposed insurgents. How do we... And yet this is a liberal administration? I thought liberal administrations were supposedly about human rights and supposedly about constitutional rights. Right? You know that any time a political administration wants to get information with regard to your communications, etc., just call Google on the phone. You still have the database on that guy Weintraub? We're kind of interested in finding out who he's been talking to and what he's been saying. I heard he was on television the other day talking about, going to the airport and complaining about our TSA, policies with regard to children's Motrin. That Motrin, that can be dangerous stuff. I want to see his emails. Gosh darn it, let me see his emails. And you know what Google says? Sure, no problem. We don't want to fight with you. And we're going to frame it as patriotism. We're right behind you, American government, because we think it's righteous what you're doing, and we're going to turn over that information. And the real criminal out there are the WikiLeaks people who are destroying society, but we at Google, we are upstanding citizens, and we are going to give you any information that you want, Mr. President and Mr. Government Agent, and we're going to do it with a great deal of pride and put our hands over our hearts and sing the national anthem, because we are on your side. And lots of us are liberals, and we drive Lexuses. Drink to that. So anyway, You've wasted another 50 minutes of your lives watching the angry moderate ramble on, not only about issues affecting the world, but about his own pet peeves. And at the heart of it all is the angry moderate's quest for attention. I'm ready for my close-up now, Mr. DeMille. So long.